I hadn't seen another car for at least 30 minutes when I noticed a blood-red emergency lights blinking in the distance. They pulsed through the fog like evil eyes watching our approach. Something about how they flickered made my skin crawl, but I slowed down anyway. As we got closer, I saw a dark SUV strategically parked sideways across both lanes. To read SOS lights were placed on either side of the vehicle, along with what looked like police cones. The whole setup looked wrong to perfect to deliberate. My heart nearly stopped when the tall figures in black hoodies emerged from behind the SUV. They moved toward our car with an unnatural synchronization that sent chills down my spine. I immediately shifted into reverse, my hands trembling on the wheel. One of them approached my window. The fog made it hard to see his face under the hood, but his body language was predatory, like a wolf cornering its prey. I cracked the window just enough to hear him. "Yes, open the door," he said in a voice that sounded more like a growl than human speech. When I refused, I saw him reach into his pocket, and the metallic glint of what could only be a gun caught in my headlights. I slammed the gas pedal, swerving around their vehicle. The crunch of the cone under our tires was followed by my wife's startled scream as she woke up. Within seconds, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror gaining on us fast. The sound of the first gunshot echoed through the night, followed by the sickening pop of our back tire. I fought to keep control as the second shot took out another tire. The horrible screech of metal on asphalt filled the car as we scraped along at 70 mph. My kids were crying in the back seat, and Emily was frantically calling 911, her voice cracking with terror. Their vehicle started ramming us from behind, each impact feeling like a hammer blow. The children's screams mixed with the sound of crunching metal, creating a nightmare symphony. I was certain we were about to die on this dark stretch of Georgia highway. Then, like an answer to our prayers, police lights appeared in the distance behind our pursuers. The criminal's car suddenly swerved onto an exit ramp, with the police in hot pursuit. We limped to the shoulder, hearts pounding in our chests. 10 minutes later, as we sat surrounded by police cars in the tow truck, an officer told us they'd caught the men. Turns out we weren't their first targets that night. Another family had escaped their trap earlier and called it in. The officer also mentioned they'd found tools, weapons, and evidence linking these men to 3 missing families who had disappeared on this same stretch of highway over the past month. We never did make it to Disney World. Some family memories aren't worth making. Back in summer 2019, when I was 16, my grandparents treated our entire family to a Royal Caribbean cruise. We were headed to the Bahamas on the Oasis of the Seas. Me, my brother Rob 20, my sister Amy and her boyfriend, my parents, aunt, uncle, 2 cousins, and grandparents. I spent most of my time with Rob since we got to share a cabin. We weren't technically supposed to. You needed someone 21 or older in each room. We just told everyone our dad was staying with us. It felt like freedom, being out there on the ocean with that little bit of independence. Everything changed on the 4th night. I was in the Viking Crown Lounge, the ship's nightclub, using someone else's SeaPass card to get in. That's when I first noticed him, a man in his 50s, sitting alone in the shadows by the window. He had this unsettling way of watching me, his head turning mechanically to follow my movements. No matter where I went in the club, his pale blue eyes stayed fixed on me. The attention made my skin crawl, so I left quickly and found my sister and her boyfriend at the schooner bar just outside. I sat with them trying to act normal, but then I saw him again. He followed me out and was sitting across the room, still staring. His face showed no expression, just those dead eyes locked onto me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I speed walked back to my cabin on deck 9, constantly checking over my shoulder. The endless identical corridors felt like a maze, and every corner I turned could have him waiting behind it. When I finally reached my room, Rob knocked on the door moments later. I'd never been so relieved to see my brother. The next night, around 1 a.m., I was at the Windjammer CIF with Rob, Amy, and her boyfriend. I was exhausted, so I headed back to the cabin alone. When I reached our door, it was slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. We always made sure to shut it completely. Cruise ship doors are heavy and close automatically. Room service wouldn't be working at this hour. The cabin looked untouched, but something felt wrong. The air felt different, like someone had been breathing in it recently. I checked every corner, even under the beds, but found nothing out of place. I woke up to something soft brushing against my cheek. Thinking it was Rob messing around, I swatted at it and mumbled for him to stop. Then I opened my eyes and saw Rob's sleeping form in the other bed. Standing over me was the man from the club, his pale hand hovering inches from my face. The scream that came out of me didn't sound human. Rob jumped up and turned on the light. What happened next was chaos. Rob tackling him, me joining in, our parents bursting through the connecting doors, security arriving minutes later. They took him to the ship's detention center, but that wasn't the end. During the investigation, they found a notebook in his cabin. It contained detailed notes about my daily routine on the ship, times I was alone, and which key card I was using to get into the club. But the most disturbing part was the photos, dozens of them, of me sleeping in our cabin, taken through the barely open door over the previous 3 nights. I never went on another cruise after that. Sometimes I still wake up at night, feeling phantom fingers on my cheek. But what really keeps me up is knowing that for 3 nights, while I slept peacefully on that floating city, he had been standing in our doorway, watching and waiting. The police later told us he was a registered sex offender who had been working as a contractor for the cruise line under a false identity. He'd been sailing back and forth between Florida and the Bahamas for 6 months. They're still trying to identify other potential victims from the photos in his cabin. Last week, 5 years after it happened, I got a package in the mail. Inside was a Royal Caribbean Sea Pass card, the same one I borrowed to sneak into the club that night. The card that had let him know exactly who I was. I'm a dead, and this happened at my grandmother's estate in rural Vermont when I was 15. My parents were away for the weekend, so they sent me and my younger brothers to stay with her. She lived alone in this massive house on private property, the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is half a mile away. At summer evening, my brother and I were playing basketball until sunset. At dinner, Grandma called me downstairs, concerned about the Morton building door being open. This confused me because none of us had been inside it all day. From the dining room window, I could see the door standing wide open, the security light casting long shadows across the yard. Both my brothers swore they hadn't touched it. That's when the first chill ran down my spine. Someone else had been in there. While discussing calling the police, I glanced through the front door's window panel and froze. There, at the bottom of the porch steps, stood a man, just standing there completely still, like he was studying the house. The security lights only illuminated a silhouette, making him look like a void cut into the night. My grandmother started panicking when I told her. Every time I tried to confront the intruder, she'd physically pull me back, tears in her eyes. As she called 911, I watched him through the dining room window. His figure was darker than the darkness around him, unnaturally still, until he suddenly turned and walked past my window. We tracked him through the house, watching through each window as he circled the property until we lost him behind the house. The police found nothing in the Morton building and no trace of him on the grounds. Grandma insisted we stay upstairs while she kept watch below. Around 10 p.m., as we were playing GameCube in the upstairs room, her scream cut through the house like a knife. We found her in the den, pointing at her pitch-black office. "Someone's in there," she whispered. We barricaded the door while she called 911 again. When the police arrived, they found him lying on her office couch, completely calm. He spoke about his intentions with an unsettling casualness. He'd been watching us for hours, waiting for the right moment to slip in through the unlocked end window. The office only had one exit, the door we were blocking. He trapped himself intentionally. The police later found his car hidden in the woods behind the property. Inside were photos of the house, including ones of us playing basketball that evening, and a detailed drawing of the house's layout. He'd been planning this for weeks. Grandma's 92 now. She installed every security system available after that night, but still jumps at shadows. Sometimes when I visit, I'll catch her staring out the dining room window at dusk, watching for that dark figure that was darker than darkness itself. Last month, she received an envelope containing one of the surveillance photos from that night us playing basketball, unaware of being watched. The postmark was from the prison where he's supposed to be serving his sentence. Me and my wife Rachel were spending our honeymoon at Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. It was our 3rd day there, and we were just relaxing on the sand near the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, enjoying the perfect weather. Rachel got up to use the restroom at one of the beachside facilities. When she came back, she was visibly shaken. She told me there had been this strange man watching her walk into the bathroom, and when she tried to leave, he deliberately blocked her path. She only managed to get away because a group of tourists walked in, forcing him to step aside. I asked her to point him out, but she looked around and said he was already gone. Our hotel was only a 5-minute walk from the beach, so we quickly headed back, making sure to report the incident to a beach patrol officer we spotted on our way. We cleaned up and then went out to a local seafood restaurant in downtown Honolulu. After dinner and some shopping around the area, we finally got back to our room around midnight. Just as we were starting to wind down, there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man in what looked like hotel housekeeping uniform. When I opened the door slightly, he immediately tried to force his way in. I pushed back against him, demanding to know what he wanted. He claimed he'd left something in the room during clean-in and needed to retrieve it. The thing is, we'd had our do not disturb sign up all day. That's when I noticed he was staring intently at Rachel. She suddenly screamed, "That's him. The man from the beach." Before I could process what she'd said, he lunged forward, grabbing my throat with one hand while reaching behind his back with the other. He pulled out a kitchen knife and started swinging it at me. If Rachel hadn't grabbed our heavy glass bedside lamp and smashed it against his head, I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. The commotion brought out everyone from the neighboring rooms. Some woman started screaming hysterically, which only added to the chaos. The hotel security and police arrived within minutes. During questioning, we learned this guy had been fired from housekeeping 3 weeks ago for inappropriate behavior toward female guests. He kept his uniform and had been stalking tourists ever since. They found zipped eyes and duct tape in his pockets. We spent the rest of our honeymoon in a different hotel, but honestly, Hawaii never felt the same after that night.